Welcome to Leadership Forward, where you'll meet Arizonans with innovative answers to our state's greatest challenges. I'm Dawn Wallace from the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership at the Flinn Foundation. So I think Miss Ellie would like the audience to know a little bit more about her dad. So tell me about sort of how you've gotten to today and all the things that you've accomplished professionally and in the community.
No, I'm happy to share my experiences with fellow Flinn-Browns. I am a native Arizonan, and so the fourth generation of my family to call Arizona home. And I went to ASU, and upon graduating with my undergraduate, there was a seat on the Mesa City Council that was open, and I tried to get anybody else I knew to run for that seat, like including my parents, friends, and my dad said, not no, but hell no. And I'm like, ugh. And my mom was like, well, no, I'd rather be watching the grandkids you're not giving me. And I'm like, cool. And I had a friend say,
mothers.
Yeah, I know. Well, what's funny is Ellie's their 34th grandchild, so it's not like they're a lack for grandchildren.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm not sure what to say about that.
Yes.
That was a shocker.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm number 7 out of 8 kids. And so Tristan and I had kids a little bit later in life. And so that's all my other siblings had them in their early 20s, which I envied for their youth. But I appreciate the financial stability of your 30s. So I had a friend who said, why don't you run? And I was like, well, what do I have to lose? And so I said, all right, I'm going to run. If I don't win, I'll go to DC and work there. And it's okay. And so election day came and the results came in. It was 60-40 and I won. And I was kind of like the dog that caught the car. And I was like, oh man, I'm 23 years old. I did not think this was going to happen. And I don't think anyone else in Mesa did either. But one of the cool things was knocking on doors and getting to know the neighbors. Like, if they didn't know me, they probably knew either my parents or their kids went to school with my siblings, or in some cases, my grandparents on both my maternal and paternal, and in some cases, even my great-great-grandparents on my mom's side of the family. And so it was a really cool experience to be an elected official at that age, because I was exposed to things that other people would never get chance to do until maybe much later on in life. And so it's like negotiating with the Chicago Cubs, for example. And like, that's quite the experience. And helping to improve neighborhoods and streets and doing streetscapes and just working with public safety to improve like response times and learning how cities run. And it was one of the coolest things I've ever got to do. And so during that time, I also went back and got my master's from W.P. Carey. And then I started teaching in the business school at Mesa Community College. And then I started teaching at ASU. And then I joined there after I left City Council. I joined ASU full-time to teach for them. And I am an instructor in the School of Applied Professional Studies. But also part of my other thing in my background, I always want to be engaged in the community and serve on different boards. And so there's probably not a social service agency that I have not been a part of or worked with in at least the East Valley or Phoenix area. And I also was the program director for the Safe Action Project with the Arizona Anti-Trafficking Network. And SAFE stands for Safeguarding All from Exploitation. And so it was to raise awareness in the hospitality and tourism industry of what can go on at hotels and resorts and restaurants of if you see something, say something. And so a lot of times victims of human trafficking are too afraid to do anything. And so if you do see something, reach out because you never know who you might be able to help. And so I'd help train the hospitality workers on the warning signs that they might see either as a maid or as like a bellhop or a front desk person. And so I really enjoyed doing that as well.
You know, when Flinn-Brown was originally envisioned, I think Jack was really focused on getting a lot of folks into state office. As it turns out, we've actually done incredibly well with fellows in local government, whether it's elected office or the administrative roles. I will tell you, just based on what you have just shared about your experience in local government, you probably did way more on council than you would really have done at the state legislature. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of impacting people's lives with like real change.
And that's one of the coolest things about being an elected, like a local elected official, is because you do see the fruits of your labors a lot sooner than you do if you were in Congress or at the state level, where you don't get much done quickly to begin with. But like one of my favorite things was there was a resident who had known like probably 5 generations of my family, really, or 6. And she would call me. She was a librarian at a school. She would call me every day on her way to work to say, hey, there's graffiti at this place and this place and this place and this place. And so I'd reach out to the transportation department and they would get it cleaned up by the end of the day. She'd call me back and be so happy and say, thank you so much. And I'm like, it's those things that I'm like, I made a difference and I helped my friends, my neighbors that I represented. And it was a real honor to do that.
Yeah. Are you also getting your doctorate?
I am right now, yes.
Did you need another challenge,
No.
like teaching 2 children, all your community work, and now you're getting a doctorate? Patrick, are you exhausted? Because I feel a little bit exhausted. Yeah. Well, so tell me then about you. I did not know that Trista was in your cohort. Yeah. And Trista and I worked together for 4 years?
4 years,
if
not more, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a great
it's a small world when people really that are involved in the community, or at least wanting to be.
Well, I always play a game where we, 6 degrees of separation between Flinn-Brown Fellows, and I can always get there in 3. So anyway, Patrick, tell us about you. You've had a very prestigious legal. I mean, you're a commercial litigator, if I'm correct.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. And thank you for having me here today. And thanks. It's exciting to be here with Chris. So I'm an attorney, a partner at Snell Wilmer. Was recently elected to the partnership this year, but
congratulations! That's a big deal.
Yes,
Yay.
so it's very exciting. So,
we're going to take a break and celebrate you for
thank
that.
you. The universe has a funny sense of humor because it's been a wild couple of months since making partners, so I guess it's a good thing. But then also like, whoa, I didn't expect this. So, but I'm a native Arizonan as well, born and raised here. My mom grew up in Globe, Arizona. That's where she's from. So had an interesting mix of small town Arizona and the bigger city. So that was really neat growing up. But and I went through Catholic school most of my time here in Arizona, and then left to go out of state for undergrad. I went to the University of Notre Dame, studied philosophy there. Absolutely loved that. And then after that, my dream was always to live in D.C. So I went and worked in Washington, D.C. I was a paralegal at the Department of Justice. And I didn't know any attorneys growing up. And I got some advice, before jumping into law school, go try out and see if you will actually like being a lawyer. I always thought that would be a good fit. And I really enjoyed my time at the Department of Justice. Did not love being a paralegal, but I realized I would like being an attorney. And so then I went and did a joint degree program at the University of Michigan for my JD.
Go Blue?
Go Blue, yes.
Go Blue.
Even though I'm a Notre Dame Irish fan to heart. And then I did a master's in public policy at Harvard. So I kind of did 1 year at Michigan, 1 year at Harvard, and would alternate for 4 years. So...
And then you came back to Arizona for your clerkships.
Yes, yeah. So I clerked for Chief Justice Scott Bales on the Arizona Supreme Court. And then I completed a clerkship with Judge David Campbell on the U.S. District Court. At the time, he oversaw the Rules Committee that writes all of the federal civil rules and different rules of procedure. And so I actually was based in a D.C. office and worked with the Rules Committee there, which writes all of the rules that then go to Congress and get approved. So it was an interesting process to be a part of that and to see how that works. So after I did those clerkships, then I came back, started at Snell and Wilmer, and have been there ever since. So, but my practice, I'm a trial attorney, so I do a lot of business, corporate governance disputes. So people fighting over whether, they have a partnership to own and run businesses together, business divorce cases, so business partners breaking up, merger and acquisition disputes, and then I do a lot of commercial real estate litigation disputes as well.
Patrick, that sounds delicious. Like the cases you must have.
You see an interesting side of humanity.
Do you really?
Yes, yeah. So it's basically, you can imagine family law, divorce, but adding in people with a lot of money that are breaking up, and can be very sad at times.
A lot of suits, but still the same level of,
absolutely.
of drama.
Yes, absolutely. So,
well, I mean, I think that's fantastic. And I think that it's wonderful to have you both sitting here. I mean, you have very different experiences and pathways, and which led you into your civic engagement work and your professional life. But today you sit here as two people from sort of different backgrounds and different professional journeys, but you found yourself as partners on a board for an organization called Keys to Change that does incredible work in the human service sector here in Arizona. And I really want to talk and dig into that a little bit. I think it's really important for fellows to know the different types of engagement that they can do in the community. It doesn't have to be elected office. You don't have to work for the government, but you can work in community organizations that have a sort of a direct line to public policy. Either they're implementing it or they're developing it and sending it sort of to policymakers. So can I have you guys start off by talking about the organization, its goals, its missions, and really what you hope to do in your governance role in terms of expanding its scope, giving more people an opportunity to use these services, how this model can address the issue of homelessness and remove barriers and maybe start to chip away at this terrible societal challenge that we have. So, Chris, you want to start, or Patrick?
Jump in. And
I'm happy to join in. So, Keys to Change is an organization with 15 collaborative partners that work every day towards the goal of ending homelessness within Arizona, and especially the Phoenix metro area. Some of our partners, and we cover the gambit of like everybody that can be involved to help anybody who needs the services, depending on where they're at in life. So either providing shelter services, so like Central Arizona Shelter Service, or a New Leaf, or Community Bridges. If you need healthcare, there's Brighter Way or Circle the City that's involved, or Elaine. Legal services. I know that we have a community court that we work with. Out of Phoenix, I believe. I could be wrong, or Maricopa County, but we also work with Maricopa County and with the city of Phoenix. And all of our partners do such wonderful work. If you need a job, there's St. Joseph the Worker. If you need food, St. Vincent de Paul. And so we really try to be that central hub to offer those that are experiencing homelessness whatever services that they might need when they come to the campus. They're at the Brian Garcia Welcome Center, and they do the intake, and then they're able to kind of assess what the needs are for our clients. And sometimes it's easy enough to say, all right, like, tell me about your family. And they're like, well, I do have like one sister that lives in like Colorado and Denver. It's like, do you think that you could go and like stay with her for some time? And they're like, I don't know, we can reach out and see. And so they reach out, and then the sister says, yeah, come and stay with me. And so we're able to buy them a ticket, send them up there. And so they're able to be housed and be able to get back on their feet. For other people, it might be providing shelter, like emergency stabilization shelter, and then getting them into like a home, whether it be an apartment or a house, and getting them back up on their feet, providing them those services so that they can reintegrate to society, or getting them the mental health that they might need.
So I mean, it's a campus environment, right?
Yes.
I mean, I think I even read that there's the U.S. Post Office so that, that people can get mail. And I mean, we all know that that's a gateway to having a job and being able to have a phone and being, everything that you need to sort of be grounded in order to find your way out of, being unhoused and homeless.
Absolutely. Homeless ID Project helps people get either their birth certificate or a state ID. That way, if they need to get Social Security disability or something along those lines, they have that address that they can use and put there, and then be able to get those checks. And then we work with Marisol Federal Credit Union so that our clients can also have a place to get money. Sorry, I know, sweetheart. Sorry, Patrick, I'll let you talk so that she's tired of hearing me talk.
I think to build on there's a lot of practicality sort of helping immediate sort of needs. So whether it's, having a mailing address, if you need a place to even store your belongings, there are these bins that they can be locked so they can place things there during the day. Then you have the more long-term sort of services, whether we've had at some point in time, I think funding is ending or has ended, but for bridge housing to help get people placed into housing, get wraparound services to help address whether it's mental health or other sort of addiction, anything like that, to help address those needs and get them the support so that they can be self-sustaining. It can help, it just helping even bring about family reunification to help bring in family members to help with loved ones who are struggling with homelessness.
So it's a holistic way of looking at addressing an individual who is homeless instead of just a shelter environment. Okay, well, what can we do to sort of, there's an employment piece, I understand. There's wellness, there's, health and mental. Why does this model work? I mean, is it because it's looking at the whole person? Or is it the fact that you're leveraging partnerships and bringing, a Circle the City, and Holly, I think Hallie has something there as well, and Lodestar and all. Is it that it's the partnership model that's making the difference?
I would say yes, that definitely helps in that you are able to leverage everybody's abilities to help that individual and seeing what is the best fit for them. And so you kind of have the economies of scale as well when they're all housed there, and it's like, all right, let's move them from whatever organization they need to go see just to help them get back on their feet. But having that partnership model is, I think, huge to the success that we've seen. Because I think last year, and it was just Keys to Change alone, housed almost 4,000 people by themselves, not counting the partner organizations. It was just Keys to Change. And I'm like, that's a huge number. And I think we need to take better pride and raise more awareness. Like, we are making a difference every single day. And that's just us, not including our partners. So collectively, we're able to make much more of a difference in the lives of those that are experiencing homelessness. It's
13 acres, so it's a pretty big property, and that's how all of this can happen. Now, what is the challenge in is there capacity to get more than 4,000 people? Like, is this scalable beyond, what we are currently doing? Is it facilities? Is it funding? Or is it just work? Does it work when you have maybe a smaller population?
Well, I'm happy to take this one so Patrick doesn't have to. But I think one of the challenges is housing and affordable housing. And that's something that has been a challenge for a very, very long time. I know you want more affordable housing for people too.
Everybody does.
Everybody does. And I'm like, but the challenge comes in where I'm like, we could find people that would want to build affordable housing, but it's where do you put it? Because you have NIMBYs that say, no, I don't want that because there's a negative connotation with it. And I think even for elected officials, that's one of the biggest challenges is when a whole neighborhood comes out and says, I don't want this type of project. And I'm like, okay, you're pit between the people you're accountable to and or greater society as a whole. What do you do? And is there some type of compromise that you can find? But it's extremely difficult in today's world where it's people equate affordable housing with poor people and they don't want that in the neighborhood because it's going to lower their property values or something, whatever the narrative that they want to say.
This is transition. I mean, right? I mean, your folks are coming in and we're building a model where folks can get the services they need so that they can, move on and be employed, own their own home, have their own apartment, whatever. So is that a narrative that maybe addresses some of the NIMBY a little bit, that it's not necessarily a permanent structure and you're going to have camps built around it and things like that, which we do see around Phoenix. I mean, you live in Mesa, but we live in Phoenix, and you know that. So what do you think? I mean, since you brought it up, I've always been intrigued about this NIMBY phenomenon because I think fundamentally people are good, right? We want to help those who don't have as much as us, but that phenomena exists because we're also human beings who are in modes of self-preservation all the time. What is the narrative that best works with people to get them over the issue of not in my backyard?
At least for me, I think it's helpful to understand. I don't think that there's just one person who's going through this. And I think when I've worked at, for instance, Andre House is nearby the campus, but they have a daily food service there. But when you're there, you see young men who are working construction jobs that can't literally afford to live anywhere. They have the boots, they're working a day job, and they're sleeping in a tent or out on the street. And so that's, to me, when you hear that sort of story about working poor and that people are, and I think everyone can understand there are many people living paycheck to paycheck, but you have one bad kind of medical experience, you have a life crisis, it's, you're very vulnerable to that. So I think understanding that there's many people that are there for different reasons, but I think hearing this story that there are people who are doing, quote unquote, the right things in terms of they're trying to work, they're trying to find jobs, they're just in a bad phase of life, and that this is transitional, and the goal is to get them out as soon as possible, because it's really destabilizing and can be harmful long term. And so I think that there's still a chronically homeless population. It's smaller, but you have this kind of transitional piece where some people are in and out because they just couldn't make rent that month and they've lost their apartment.
So as board members, you're intimately involved with, and understand the challenges that exist. I mean, not only in homelessness as a policy problem, but also the operations of an organization that has to manage 15 different partners and all of the funding and stuff. So what are some of the challenges that Keys to Change has that maybe could be solved with better public policy, certainly more money. And we can talk about that too. Like what is the best source of funding for an organization that does this work? Is it government funding? Is it donor-based? Is it, I'm trying to get to can we do more of a successful model? Can we do it in Tucson? Can we do it in rural Arizona? I was just in Globe. I mean, homelessness is not a problem exclusive to the Phoenix metropolitan area. In rural Arizona, it's almost, in my heart, feels a little bit more dire because there's no opportunity. They don't have working poor there. They just have poor. So can you tell me a little bit about opportunities where there could be community support for Keys to Change through Fellows connections or just better public policy, I think?
I think definitely better public policy and educating elected officials on what harmful bills will do to social service agencies and basically put them out of business if you try to pass something. And if you don't realize the ramifications of your actions, a lot of them, I think, are taking just reactionary approaches to oh, well, this happened or this could happen. And so we want to be preventative in nature. And I'm well, that's not, you assume that everybody who is homeless or has to go to rehab, I'm oh, they're just a drug addict or an alcoholic. And so we need to get them off the streets. I'm all right, if you try to pass these bills that it requires overly burdensome regulation on these organizations, it's going to destroy the organization. And then you're going to have homeless individuals going to your hospitals. You're going to arrest them. You can't arrest your way out of, you shouldn't criminalize homelessness. In my mind, really, that's where you can involve the communities. One of the things that Keys to Change does is help organize Project Connect around the Valley. And so that's where they engage faith-based community members and other organizations within different communities to help provide services in that specific area for those that are experiencing homelessness or the working poor who might just need something. And so I would say that funding always will be a huge one. If we could get unrestricted funds, that would be great. But with ARPA dollars drying up and no longer there, we really have to be realistic about what programs are being successful, what do we want to replicate, and what do we want to continue, or what do we need to discontinue and maybe bring back when there is a better funding model. But again, I think that comes down to raising awareness among elected officials, especially, I would say, at the state level, and just like Patrick said earlier, telling that human story that each one of these individuals is a real live human being. And I know that for some elected officials, they feel oh, it's dollars and cents, what's going to make the most sense for us to do. But I'm you can't take the human connection out of it.
No, I mean, I do think there's a perception of homelessness, right? Either somebody's not willing to work or I think there is also an understanding that mental health issues can trigger, cause folks to not be able to work and not be able to have a quality of life, or that they're victims of domestic violence, or, a lot of other sort of social determinants. I think that's a big theme with all of our social service programs, right? The reason that we are maybe have issues that we have are really built around these social determinants. So tell me, what would you say? I mean, Patrick, you have this sort of legal mind, and I suspect that's what your talents and what you bring to the table. Like, what are the things that we could ask policymakers to do to create maybe a long-term solution? I mean, housing someone temporarily does not get rid of our societal homeless problem, right? And I understand we also have an affordability problem here, and that affordability extends to middle-class families as well, right? So what ideas would you suggest? I mean, is there maybe a silver bullet policy? I mean, I can't believe I said that, because I would never say that in my policy work ever, but maybe there is.
I know that we have a white paper that our CEO wrote, and it's basically looking at, and I'll let Patrick, I'm so sorry.
No, it's right.
I should never interrupt. I need to take my turn. This is something I'm just very passionate about, and I really do want to have, I am a big proponent of good public policy. I want to make sure whatever is implemented is actually doable and feasible, and not just, here's a solution in search of a problem, or a feel-good thing where it's not actually going to do anything, but everyone's going to shout hooray. And so I'm like, no, I want real good public policy that can actually implement meaningful change in our communities. And with the white paper, it talks about the bell curve, and I think a lot more money, if public policy could be addressed, is those that are at the beginning of that bell curve. And so it's more resources for, like what Patrick said, those that are like one paycheck away from living on the street, because in reality, there for the grace of God go I. And I'm like, if we can have more rental assistance and make that readily available to people, that way they're not like, okay, I'm kicked out, so I'm going to have to sleep in my car, or I have to couch surf because I don't have anywhere to go, and I can only take or ask someone to let me do that for so long before I have to find someone new, and then it just gets too difficult. So I'm going to go sleep at the public park, and now that's criminalized, that if you do that, you're gonna, any type of urban camping, you get arrested or cited for. And so I think addressing, like looking at the bell curve that we have and seeing like where can we find those good public policy, or at least good funding for those preventative things, whether if it is somebody who has domestic violence, I'm like making sure that those organizations that help those victims are regularly and well funded. Or if it is about mental health, making sure that that is a component that we can address, and seeing the value in our social service partners, and not just, you're just one more nonprofit, who cares what you do. I'm like, they make a world of difference. And I think inviting elected officials to come and tour the campus so that they do see the work that we're doing. And I'm like, for far too often, I feel that it's people show a callous indifference towards the needs of this population because of, out of sight, out of mind. It doesn't really matter.
Well, what they see is not.
Well, they see the narrative, on the news, that it's like, oh, look at, there's like 10,000 people that are camped out in downtown Phoenix, and it's terrible. And I'm like, that's not really how it is. And I'm like, we need to do the correct narrative. Sorry, Patrick, I'll let you talk.
Do you want to add to that? I mean, this notion of there is a chicken before the egg, or there is a cart before the horse, and it's prevention. And you can probably apply that same idea to education, to child safety, to healthcare, right? Can you talk more about that? So, I think that's a really good.
I think maybe just it's slightly different, but I think in terms of the what can be effective in terms of bridge housing, doing something where, again, if people fall into homelessness, how to get them into somewhere where they can have some stability, maybe get some of the support that they need so that they can then move on, whether it's finding, So if you have housing for 2 or 3 months and then you're able to get a job as you're stable, you're able to get some regular medication for whatever you need, and then you're able to go back out and work. That, I think that can be a very helpful sort of model. In terms of the prevention, and I guess I'll just speak from my legal perspective, I've been in eviction court. I've had to evict typically for clients who own homes where people break in and they squat there. And so I'm not evicting people because they failed to pay rent, but I'm evicting because they're just illegally living in someone's home. And so it's been, to me at times, really shocking to be in eviction court and the kind of cattle call where you have 40 or 50 people who are all appearing on Zoom now because of the post kind of COVID era where you can appear virtually, and most people just are there because they can't afford to pay rent. There are some who don't, almost all don't have legal counsel. And you see in the state legislature at times, there's proposals, let's add another procedure to eviction court. Let's add this to a notice. And I think that really is, I don't think more procedure is going to help people in eviction court. I think what they really need is, it's an access to justice problem of they need to be able to identify resources, whether it's legal counsel or housing support services, before they end up in eviction court. And then they actually need someone there in eviction court to help guide them through that, whether that's an attorney or some sort of housing advocate. And so I think, how do we better address that problem, where I think those people then can be resources to help get, if they do ultimately getting evicted, pointing them in the right direction to find other support so that maybe this won't be as devastating as it could be. So I think when we're in terms of thinking about on the prevention side and policy, I don't think more rules and procedure are necessarily the way to go. It's about how can we help facilitate getting people connected to the right folks that can help provide, support or direct them in ways that might be more meaningful. And so to kind of build on that, like the Arizona Supreme Court's approved different types of housing advocates. They're not attorneys, but they're people that can help you understand the process, help you understand how to speak up and articulate your case in court. And they can also be a point of resources of helping direct you to where there might be housing support, where you might be able to find additional housing if you have been evicted, how to clean up your record if you do have an eviction on it. And so I think, but again, the problem is how do you actually get people connected with those folks that do that sort of work? And I think, again, it's probably a funding component, but also I think just availability of helping people know that it's there before they end up there, because most people don't know about that service until you're in that position.
Well, and how do we get the word out then? Like, I mean, how do you tell people that there is services for you if you should ever become homeless? I mean, I hear what you're saying. They don't know until they need it, but how do you tell people who don't need it that it's there when they need it? Yeah.
One idea that I think would be useful is if we work within even like Flinn-Brown and reach out to fellows that are elected like municipal office holders, because whenever like Mesa sends out a utility bill or something, and a lot of them can be online even, but they usually can include some type of like snippet of information. And so I'm like, that could be an easy one because it reaches everybody who lives in the city and has to pay like the water bill or like your trash and recycling pickup, for example. And that way, when they read that, they could be like, oh, this is, I don't know how many people actually read those things or even get the in-mail ones, but I imagine it can be on the emails too, that just say, hey, these services are available if you need them. Because like, look, when I was an elected official, I wanted to help like the elderly who are on a fixed income. And so like, if they made a certain amount of money, they could qualify for assistance during the summer months when it would be super hot, and they could get a rebate on their utility bill. And so I'm like, that was very helpful. That's another good public policy thing for elected officials to look into, just to try to do that.
Do you think our first responders have a role in this? I mean, because occasionally, someone will, someone who's homeless, maybe they're not doing well, and someone calls the fire department and EMT or the police come or whatever. And do they know enough about the services that are available so that they can help refer? Or are those people, are those folks sort of going to the hospital and going through a different like path? Like, I guess I'm trying to figure out like, the people that come into contact with people who need these services the most, are they equipped to share these opportunities?
I think some of them are, because I know that Community Bridge is one of the partners with Keys to Change, and I'm also on their board. We have great relationships with the public safety organizations, both police and fire, throughout the Phoenix Metro Valley. And so that way, if they pick up somebody, they can bring them to Community Bridges to get help. And that way they can get the services that they need. And Community Bridges can also work with them and help them either get housing or like just the right medication, whatever they might need. And so like,
but to your point, like, you don't want to put someone who's homeless in jail. Like, yes. That costs the taxpayers way more money than if we were to help someone find a path to employment, to permanent housing, to healthcare, to mental health services. Just being able to get your mail, I think, is so important. So what else would you share that maybe the Flinn-Brown Network could be helpful in? Like, obviously, you have access to state legislators. We've got 4 of them now. And we have, I think, 7 or 8 mayors across the state. We have lots of council folks from, Tucson here and Flagstaff and all around. But you also have a lot of folks like you, Patrick, who are in the private sector, who are, professionally in their area of expertise, but their hearts are in helping their communities. How do we engage those folks to help advocate or provide their expertise? I mean, part of the reason I assume that you're on the board is because you bring certain knowledge to the overall governance. And so how do we get more people in the network involved?
So a couple of things, I think, for those who are in elected office, especially the state legislature, we do tours, and what we're trying to do is help bring in folks who are serving in that capacity to show them what's happening on the campus and help just, I think, increase awareness about what service providers are doing on the ground. And I think that should help inform what types of policies that they're going to be, thinking about, debating, and ultimately putting into place. So that's, I think, one step. If you are an elected official, we have these tours. We love to bring you onto campus and to help facilitate some knowledge and learning. The other piece, and I think that this is not just a problem for Central Phoenix, but that we need partners all over the Phoenix metro area and across the state that are working to address this, because it shouldn't just be that there's only one place to get services if you're in need. And so I think finding those people that are, if you're serving at the city level, having those sort of partnerships and trying to figure out what could it look like to help ensure that we have services for those who are experiencing homelessness in Glendale or out in the East Valley, and that we have enough sort of support so that it's not just all concentrated in one place, which I think is where then you can see a lot of the animosity that grows out when you just see an overwhelming amount of people that are all concentrated there who might be homeless. But that's because in part, that's really where the resources are. And so how do we kind of spread that and have everyone sharing in that piece?
We didn't talk a lot about families. I'm assuming that children are on the campus as well and need services, and they need to go to school. I think that you're right, if we can broaden the reach and create satellites and models all over the state, people can stay in their communities, right? The kids could stay in the schools that they've been going to, and they have friendships and social networks. And that was one thing that was very hard for me when I did education work was, McKinney-Vento basically, did allow children to stay in the school, if they were homeless. But most often kids would be bused an hour. It's so traumatic for families. So I think, again, best practices, expansion makes a lot of sense, but there needs to be cooperation, right? You cooperate, Keys to Change cooperates with 15 partners, but those people have partners and those organizations have partners. We certainly have the network for this to happen. We're going to try and get another tour set up. We can talk to our 4 legislators. I'm sure you know them. We've got 2 from Tucson. Brian Garcia actually is from Tempe, and he's fantastic. And of course, you guys know Matt Grass and Kevin Volk and Chris Mathis. So, and by the way, we have about 100 fellows that show up for League of Cities and Towns every year. So let's put up a banner and let's get them signed up for a tour. I think this will be great.
Can I add one piece
yes,
of what more
please.
Flinn-Brown Fellows can do? So at least in my capacity being on the board, I've been serving on a public policy and advocacy subcommittee. And one simple thing we did when Governor Hobbs was elected was put together a 2-page white paper. And I helped draft that. But basically of like, here's 5 things you can do just at an administrative level to help reduce paperwork or complications with trying to help those who are experiencing homelessness, or here's some policy ideas and things to think about. So I think for Flinn-Brown members who are serving on other boards doing something similar, I think that can be a really effective piece of advocacy. And so again, I think that there's little tiny ways that you can start doing that. And some of it has been helpful. We've been able to get minor administrative changes done that can help reduce paperwork and some of the hurdles of like, why do we have to mail in 4 copies of a photo ID when you can just email one? Things that are simple like that.
Administrative bureaucracy.
Yes, the things we all love. So,
government.
So I think for fellows in that capacity, when you're serving there, thinking about what can we do on a policy level that's simple, easy, short and sweet, and identifying some easy wins, I think that that's a great way.
Here's what I do in the next newsletter when we publish the link to this podcast. I'll put in, if you send it to me, your CEO's white paper, and I'll also put in a link to the 2-page advocacy so that if folks want to read and they want to sort of, we have fellows who are in sort of ancillary, we have Elise Skidis who does the Food Activate Network, right? Like there's got to be a correlation there in terms of the constituencies that she serves and that Keys to Change serves. So like, how do you find someone who's doing work in food systems and then also connect them with folks who are trying to address our homeless issues? I mean, and she's just one of 1,000 fellows, or 465 or 463, because I've got 2 here and maybe a future one. If we could just, I've been with you guys and I want to kind of be respectful of your time, but I do want to sort of end on, tell me a little bit about what Flinn-Brown has, why did you decide to do Flinn-Brown, and what has it done for you since you went through the academy and you've been pretty active members of the network? I mean, whether you purposely seek out the network or you're in a community of leaders where it's impossible not to meet up with a fellow occasionally. Tell me what that means for you. Patrick, we'll start with you.
So for me, I native Arizonan, but then leaving pretty much for 10 years to go to school out of state and work, and then coming back. It was a great sort of experience of, here's an exposure to what's going on in Arizona in terms of public policy and helping, I think, advance, making our state even better. And so for me, that was just a great kind of way of like, here's all these phenomenal people that are doing great things. Here's what's happening at the state level, the city level. And so for me, it was a great kind of introduction back home about and finding out and figuring out where can I get involved, getting to meet people that are doing really wonderful things. So I think from that networking and just knowledge-based kind of perspective, that was super informative and helpful for me.
That's great. Chris, did you meet your wife before or no? Yeah, so you were...
Yeah, we actually met in 2009. Okay. We were both Capital Scholars through ASU working in DC.
That's right.
Yes.
That's
right. I sought it out because I saw a lot of, I remember getting the email, it's like, oh, you should apply for become a Flinn-Brown. And so I was like, okay. And I saw a lot of the network that had participated before, and they're great friends, great leaders in the community. And I was like, well, and I thought maybe I'll run for a statewide office one day. I'll never say never, but I'm like, as right now, I'm very happy with life at home with our 2 kids. And so maybe after my doctoral program's over, then maybe, but we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, I think you have a lot of...
I have a lot on my plate. So, but I really appreciated just learning more about the state, how it operates, and seeing the diverse perspectives of Flinn-Brown Fellows. But always being respectful. And like, just because we disagree didn't mean that we were disagreeable. And you don't find that in society as a whole these days. And so I always just liked that. I'm like, I always like having conversation. You don't have to try to change my mind, but I love to know where you're coming from so that I'm like, at least I can understand that and be like, okay, now that makes more sense to me if there's a reason why you feel strongly about X position. And I think that through like respectful dialogue, we can make a world of difference, especially in policy and in changes. But far too often, people don't want to listen.
That's been sort of the privilege of my experience heading the program, is that I came from a political world where, you know, it was rare to see that civility, but it's really amazing to walk into, you know, you guys did Academy, you know what that process is. And I help curate, and we purposely find people who don't agree. But then to watch the evolution of sort of professional ideology clashing, but then sort of running concurrent with friendship developing and respect developing. And you just see that it's like a laboratory where I absolutely believe we've proved that you can be politically diverse, but still engage in a civil and respectful manner. When people say that society is not conducive to that anymore, I want to bring them into that room and say, that's not true. You just have to work hard. It's a muscle you have to develop. It's not innate to us as human beings to necessarily kumbaya with people we don't agree with. But when you realize that there's power and impact in knowing how other people think about things, whether you'll ever agree with them or not, understanding that is powerful. It makes you powerful in the work that you do because, well, you can appeal to the masses at that point. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I mean, I like both of you very much, but Miss Ellie, you've been the star of this show for 47 minutes. You have been amazing, little girl. And I hope that when you're 18 years old, you look back on this and see that your dad is the coolest for bringing you into the podcast.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for giving me your time today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you.
And then we will get another field trip going, and we'll get the fellows to go. I certainly am very anxious to see the campus and to learn more about it. So thank you again to Chris, the Honorable Chris Glover. You'll always have that. And Patrick, maybe one day I will be able to refer to you as the Honorable Patrick Tighe. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That wraps up this episode of Leadership Forward. You can find out more about the work of the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership at our website, azcivicleadership.org.